Discover how one incredible man revealed a hidden path to freedom for a girl sold into darkness. Jake Thompson wiped his brow as he surveyed the empty hallways of Crestview High School, the fading sunlight struggling to pierce through smudged windows. The laughter and chatter of students had long faded, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of hope that lingered in every neglected corner. As the janitor in this struggling Appalachian town, he took pride in keeping their sanctuary clean. But today, his heart felt heavier than usual. He stared out into the world he could never quite reach, plagued by memories of a childhood spent in poverty, void of warmth and support. He emptied the last of the classroom trash cans, but a gnawing feeling clenched his stomach. How many kids had come and gone today, just to forget their own burdens? Gentle souls, each one clutching tightly to their dreams, yet he knew all too well that darkness could swallow them whole. Feeling the weight of their struggles, he found solace in his work, channeling his unfulfilled aspirations into every sweep of the broom, polishing floors like he wished to polish the paths of these young lives. Yet, a familiar ache pulled at him, a voice whispering doubts that crept like vines around his resolve. He was just a janitor. What power did he really hold? The fleeting moments of joy he provided felt all too small against the shadows looming in his own life. Each day he fought desperately to drown out the noise of hopelessness, yearning for a way to push back against the rising tide. Jake paused as he descended the rickety stairs to the basement, a space forgotten and abandoned. With a sigh, he prepared to clean the dusty corners. But as his mop grazed a chilling draft, he felt a prickling sensation, a sense of unease crawling up his spine. What lay hidden in the darkness? His heart raced as he opened a rusted door, a creak echoing through the solitary room beyond. The sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. In the dim light sat Mia, her bright eyes dulled by despair, the bruises on her skin telling stories he couldn't bear to read. A wave of recognition washed over him. Her spirit flickered, reminding him too much of himself, somehow snagged in circumstances beyond their control. A fire ignited within him, battling the bitter fear that threatened to consume everything. This wasn't just an injustice. This was someone's life. Before they could process the moment, a sense of urgency struck. He knew he had to do something, but his heart ached with uncertainty, wrestling with the weight of an impossible choice. Would he risk everything for a girl he barely knew? What if he failed? But the thought of Mia's dreams, twisted in the grip of darkness, struck him like lightning. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Eyes locked, a silent vow formed between them, a connection neither could deny. As Jake began teaching Mia small lessons about safety and resilience, their whispers took on a life of their own, each shared breath building an unbreakable thread of hope. However, the shadows returned, darker and more expansive with each passing moment. The threats loomed near, lurking like a vulture waiting for its prey. Jake felt his insides twist in knots, his vulnerability as visible as the dirt beneath his fingernails. Could he keep Mia safe while navigating a world entrenched in power and greed? As the external pressures simmered, he could feel his own hope teetering on a ledge, prompting the gnawing question, would he have the courage to confront the nightmares that chased them both? The stakes had never been higher. The price of silence felt heavier than ever. And as their fragile plans began to unfold, Jake realized the real battle was just beginning, a battle that would cling to them like a thick fog, unwilling to let go. Jake felt the walls of the dimly lit room press in on him, each shadow amplifying the sheer weight of the situation. Mia's eyes, once filled with life, reflected a haunting blend of fear and fragile hope. He had intended to offer her comfort, but it now struck him that they were locked in a shared struggle. The duality of their fates intertwined, and with that realization came a burning determination. With the dark clouds of uncertainty swirling around them, Jake made a choice. He would begin to unravel the prison they were stuck within. At that moment, he understood that he could uphold his own confused past as a light to guide Mia through her darkness. He began by sharing small pieces of himself, recounting tales of the difficult choices he faced growing up. With every story, he revealed the importance of resilience and the unwavering pursuit of freedom. In turn, Mia gathered courage from his words, her spirit visibly lifting as she hung on to his every sentence. The connection between them deepened. It was a lifeline in the tempest of their realities. Each lesson birthed new energy within Jake, igniting aspects of himself he had long thought extinguished. As he offered advice, he realized it also served as a confrontation of his own fears. He was standing up not just for Mia, but for himself. Days turned into weeks as they forged their unsteady alliance. Jake found himself taking road trips to gather resources, books, food, anything that could help Mia rebuild a sense of normalcy. Each outing transformed from mere errands into opportunities for self-discovery. The small moments of triumph, whether stealing smiles at a diner or hoarding art supplies, solidified his sense of purpose. The unceasing weight of shadows, however, continued to linger. Jake's sleepless nights were plagued by worry, not just about the dangers lurking in Mia's life, but about the dark corners of his own past. Whispers of self-doubt and the long-held belief that he was just a janitor haunted him, leaving him restless and desperate for clarity on his worth. What did it mean to truly fight for someone? What did he have to offer when the shadows pressed in from all sides? The tension twisted in his stomach as he confronted these questions. It became a mantra in his mind. He had power within, a potential untapped until this fight ignited purpose in his veins. Each stride he took alongside Mia brought him closer to a hidden version of himself, one filled with resolve that he had buried deep beneath layers of obligation and resignation. Yet, the looming threat that had haunted them both now filtered into their lives. Confrontations held fragments of cold reality that were impossible to ignore. When news of Mia's past began to surface in whispers around town, more than fear flashed in Jake's heart. Instinct kicked in, demanding action. They had reached a tipping point. In a moment of clarity, he understood that change required confrontation. It was a choice not just for Mia, but for himself. The time had come to face the darkness that had slunk into their lives. Would he seize this moment to become the man he never thought he could transform into? As he resolved to take the next step, another wave of doubt crashed over him. What if he was unprepared? What if he failed her? But this wavering uncertainty could no longer dictate his actions. He looked to Mia, knowing in his heart that she deserved the fight as much as he did. It was now or never. As he hefted off the weight of self-doubt, he whispered to Mia that they would not be defined by the shadows. With uncertainty still swirling in their hearts, they would charge forward together. The first steps of confrontation loomed ahead, but Jake could feel the stirrings of something powerful within him, the realization that amidst the chaos, perhaps he was not merely a janitor after all. As they prepared for whatever lay ahead, the dark figures from their past moved closer, their intentions vile and clear. A test awaited, one that would demand everything they had. Was Jake truly ready to reclaim not just Mia's freedom, but his own? The first light of dawn spilled into the room, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. Jake rubbed at his eyes, aware that sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by a constant brooding vigilance. He felt the weight of what lay ahead pressing against his chest, but there was no turning back. Today marked the first real confrontation they had been preparing for, and both he and Mia had to find their footing amidst the tension that thickened the air like fog. He glanced at Mia, her softened features bathed in golden light, still lost in slumber. The sight spurred an unexpected intensity within him, like a flame rekindled in a long-abandoned hearth. He was struck by how fragile hope could be, yet how tenaciously it clung to life. As he moved quietly around the room, gathering the small supplies they had managed to collect, he resolved to project a confidence he didn't fully feel. With everything they had come to share, he sensed that Mia was counting on him as much as he was on her. Each moment he spent with her transformed him. She was slowly bringing him back from the darkness where he had been mired for so long. He recalled the stories he had told her about his past, the moments that carved his path, defining him as a man willing to fight, even when he didn't know what that fight would entail. Those memories felt sharper now, almost like armor he could don. As they readied themselves, Jake mapped out how the day would unfold. Part of him bristled at the notion of confrontation, yet a surge of purpose coursed through him, a nameless energy coaxing him forward to face the demons that threatened to tear them apart. He could sense the looming net of danger tightening around their lives. The whispers grew louder, shaping fears into something tangible. It ignited a call to arms within him. "We're doing this," he told himself, as much a reminder as a promise. Mia stirred, blinking sleep from her eyes. "What's the plan?" Jake paused, sensing the gravity of that simple question. He had hopes pinned to his elaborate mental blueprint, but could he actually articulate it without his voice quaking? "We need to meet with the people who know about your past. Find out how deep the roots are, and if we can pull them out." Mia's expression shifted from sleepiness to resolve. Her fear was veiled beneath layers of determination. "I want to do this. But what if they come after us again?" The question hung in the air, a reminder of their vulnerability. He had to offer her more than reassurances. "Then we'll be ready. We've come this far. We won't let them dictate our lives any longer." But Jake felt the fissures in his own confidence mirrored in her eyes, and the tenuous thread connecting them felt fragile. He realized that actions alone would not suffice. They had to bolster each other's spirits with more than words. "Remember what we talked about, Mia," he said quietly, searching for authenticity. "No matter what they throw at us, we're not alone. We have to trust ourselves, each other." Taking a deep breath, Jake led them out of the quiet cocoon of the room and into the bright unknown. They stepped outside, the world crackling with the energy of a day poised to unravel their past. The air felt charged, and every flutter of anxiety clawed at his heart. Movement caught his eye. 2 figures lingered in the distance, shadows taking shape in the sunlight. His pulse quickened. They were part of the darkness he had hoped to confront. Was this the moment it all fell apart? In his gut, a certainty surfaced, pushing through the trepidation. He tightened his grip on Mia's hand, willing her to feel the connection that surged between them. Today was a defining moment. Either they would rise together, or they would be swallowed whole by the muck of their history. What if confronting these figures exposed more than just their fear? What if it revealed their hidden strengths as well? As they approached, apprehension coursed through Jake's veins. They were teetering on the brink of discovery, a hollow space ready to be filled with either triumph or despair. But Jake had come too far to back down now. They'd either reclaim their narrative or be further ensnared by their past. As the figures stepped forward, Jake's resolve hardened like steel, ready for whatever awaited them. Would the confrontation turn the tide in their favor, or seal their doom? Jake's heart raced as he faced the 2 figures. The sunlight gleamed off their sharp features, making it hard to decipher the intent behind their composed expressions. His mind flickered between thoughts of retreat and the urgency to forge ahead. The air was thick with tension, as if time itself was curtailing their every breath. "Mia," he whispered, his grip on her hand tightening. "Stay close to me." She nodded, her resolve visible despite the fear etched on her face. Together, they were an ember igniting the ashes of hope, yet he could still feel the shadows clinging to their footsteps. The figures moved closer, their faces becoming familiar in an unsettling way. Old ghosts of Jake's past loomed around him, embodied by these strangers. He had chased the semblances of respectability, but what had emerged was a warped reflection of who he thought he should be. This confrontation felt less about them and more about the man he had been, the one who ran away. "Jake," one of them said, a voice sharp enough to slice through his defenses, "we have unfinished business." Instinctively, the memories surged. There was a time when he would have backed down, allowing fear to dictate his actions. But today, something deeper thrummed within him. The fear morphed into a fierce determination, carving a new path where once there was only darkness. "Not anymore," he replied, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. Mia's eyes flickered with admiration, and each pulse of courage reflected in her gaze helped him stabilize his shaking core. He could feel the collective weight of their pasts, drawing closer like a noose, yet Jake took a breath and stepped forward, anchoring himself in the present. "What do you want?" he challenged, demanding clarity through the chaos. Their smirks faltered, but it was the flicker of vulnerability in his challenger's eyes that sparked understanding in him. These were not just enemies. They were reminders of choices he had made, risks he had skirted around, and the realization hit him. He had the power within him to rise above. "We want what's rightfully ours," one of them sneered, but Jake zeroed in on the cracks in their bravado. "I won't let you take anything from her," he found himself proclaiming, like a knight protective of his charge. They may have declared war in a different context, but he was no longer the man who ran from battles. As the confrontation escalated, Jake focused inward. He felt the shift and saw potential bubbling beneath the surface. Had Mia and their shared mission sparked a light that had long lain dormant? Perhaps this was not merely a confrontation about the past. It was a crucible for discovering who he was meant to be. "Look at us," he said, his tone unwavering. "You represent shadows, while we're here to claim our light. This ends now." His boldness seemed to rattle the figures. For the first time, uncertainty washed over their faces. Jake seized that moment, aware that it wasn't just about bravado. It was a call to reject the fear that had once held him captive, an assertion of his newfound identity, a man unafraid to stand his ground. Mia's hand squeezed his, and he felt her heartbeat sync with his own, a rhythm of shared defiance. Together they drew strength from each other, a fact he had begun to understand profoundly. It was not just about confronting danger, it was about seizing agency over their own lives. But just as Jake's certainty began to solidify, an unexpected force pierced the atmosphere. The realization that engaging with the depths of their fears also beckoned unearthing truths he'd concealed deep within himself. What if the shadows bore secrets about both him and Mia's pasts that were yet to be revealed? Fresh dread twisted in his stomach, and he wondered, were they truly prepared to dive into the darkness that loomed ahead? As tension reached a boiling point, Jake felt the ground beneath them shifting, ready for something more, a revelation waiting on the precipice. Would they emerge stronger, or be swallowed by the very thing they sought to conquer? With every breath, Jake sensed the atmosphere around them thickening, as if the very air was alive with the weight of unspoken histories. The two figures before him transformed from mere adversaries into tangible embodiments of everything he feared: disappointment, failure, and the remnants of a past he had desperately tried to escape. Yet, standing beside Mia invigorated him. Their shared ambition was no longer a fleeting idea. They were poised to confront the ghosts together, a unity that had become their shield. "Listen," Jake began, channeling a determination that felt both foreign and exhilarating. We won't back down. We're forging ahead, and nothing you say can intimidate us. The steady cadence of his words echoed louder than the anxious fluttering inside him. The figures exchanged incredulous glances, the facade of control slipping further. Jake pressed on, sensing a shift in the balance, their power waning before his insistence. Had he always been this capable, waiting for the right catalyst to ignite? The fire in his core propelled him forward, urging him to ask the next question that lay heavy on his tongue. What did you think you would achieve here? Each word fell like a stone, heavy with intent. The mention of their motives stripped away some of the bravado they carried. Their vulnerability nudged at Jake's instincts. Perhaps they were unraveling, much like he had in parts of his journey. Achievements don't mean anything, the taller figure hissed, frustration evident in the sharpness of his voice. We want recognition, and you've— No, Jake interrupted, his voice firm, sharp as glass. You want control. You want to remind me of who I used to be. A rush of clarity enveloped him, transforming the psychological burden of shame into something lighter, like smoke dissipating in the wind. Mia's grip tightened on his arm. In her presence, he discerned more than just sympathy. She offered a reflection of strength he yearned to own. He was unearthing pieces of himself that had been buried under the weight of expectations and avoidance. A version of Jake that was reaching toward the light, unafraid to anchor himself in truth. This isn't only about your unfinished business, he said. It's about every opportunity I denied myself, and you won't reduce me to just another title you claim. As those words hung in the air, he braced for their reaction. This time, he wouldn't recoil. He felt each moment unfurling like a layered narrative, and he was the protagonist, finally embracing the entirety of his story. The figures recoiled slightly, their posture shifting, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. For all their bravado, Jake's rejection of their influence acted as a mirror, forcing them to see he was not the fragmented man they had encountered in the past. I won't be your puppet anymore, Jake asserted, drawing strength from the realization that while they embodied his fears, he possessed the capabilities to reshape this confrontation. With newfound clarity, he recognized that these figures represented the last remnants of an identity that had undergone significant transformation. Yet as he prepared for the next steps, something tugged at the edges of his awareness, an unsettling thought that provoked doubt. What did he still keep buried from Mia? Telling her about his past was pivotal, but what comfort could he give if the roots of their connection were still tangled in secrets? The potential fallout loomed larger than the figures in front of them. At that moment, Jake sensed not only the fragility of their confrontation, but also a powerful truth. Conflict often paved the way for growth, both personal and relational. With courage building in his chest, he realized he needed to face not only these two, but also the truths that had long haunted him. As silence enveloped them, Jake understood that the fight was not limited to this encounter. It was a beacon calling him to delve deeper into his own essence, uncovering the scars and the strength entwined within. With a decisive step forward, he asked, "What secrets lie beneath this facade we've all created?" The silence settled like dust after a storm, leaving the question hanging precariously, a gateway to revelations that could either deepen their connection or fracture everything they had built. Would Jake, driven by a need for clarity and integrity, dare to unearth these shadows, or would fear once again lead him astray? The answers awaited, stark and undeniable, resting on the edge of revelation. Jake felt the weight of his question linger in the air, pregnant with unspoken fears. It was as if time had halted, allowing each individual present to withdraw into their minds, grappling with the implications of what lay beneath the surface. He could see the figures before him tensing, their confidence wavering as the gravity of his words sank in. As if buoyed by adrenaline, Jake took a step closer, feeling the threshold of his old self dissolving into the background. He was venturing into dangerous territory, a psychological landscape marked by layers of betrayal and authenticity. The tension thrumming in the air made his heart race, but he was determined to push through. "Let's start with you." He directed his gaze at the taller figure, now visibly uncomfortable. "For all your posturing, you're just scared of being forgotten. But you can't cling to the past to gain relevance." With every word, he dismantled the fortress of arrogance they had built, refusing to let their history dictate his narrative. The figure's facade cracked further, anger seeping into the corners of his stance. "What do you know about relevance?" he spat, voice trembling with a fury that revealed the cracks in his carefully constructed armor. "I know that we create our own," Jake replied, a raw honesty pouring from him. The admission felt liberating, a step toward claiming his own narrative. Relevance isn't something to take from others. It's what we build for ourselves. The realization that he had validated his own journey struck him profoundly. He was no longer just reacting. He was initiating, commanding the direction of this confrontation. Mia, who had been watching with a keen awareness, finally spoke up. "And I think it's time you both face the truth. You've built this identity on fear and manipulation. You're angry at us because we refuse to play your game." Her voice was steady, and the clarity in her tone reaffirmed Jake's resolve. Together, they were evolving, challenging not only their adversaries but each other to dig deeper. Yet even as adrenaline coursed through his veins, a creeping uncertainty clawed at him. The path he had chosen was not without consequence. Revealing himself fully to Mia meant untangling the secrets of his past, ones he'd kept tightly wrapped for fear of judgment. What lay under those layers? Would she still see him as the same Jake, or would the man he projected come undone? "Every chance I took to silence the past just masked the reality I was living with," he admitted, more to himself than anyone else. "But not anymore. We can't move forward until those secrets are laid bare." This declaration opened the floodgates, forcing him to confront what he had long thought buried. How could he expect Mia to stand by him when he was still hidden behind a veil of deceit? The two figures squared their shoulders, their confidence faltering, yet Jake wasn't merely confronting them anymore. He was facing his own inadequacies, illuminating the shadows of his past. This confrontation held the possibility of uncovering more than just their deceit. It could lead him to discover the hidden aspects of himself he had long neglected, the traits that could strengthen their bond. Suddenly, without warning, the taller figure lunged forward, desperation lacing his attack. "You think you've got it all figured out? You're as fragile as the rest of us." The accusation stung, an echo of his own thoughts. But Jake met it with determination. "Fragile enough to rise each time I fall," he shouted. "You want control? You think it's a weapon, but it's just a chain that you've wrapped around your own existence." The atmosphere shifted again, tension rising and stealing breath as both adversaries hesitated. It was a moment of reckoning. For Jake, this was a chance to demand not just accountability from them, but from himself. But as the confrontation reached its boiling point, Jake knew one more truth loomed like shadows at dusk. Facing the past with Mia could either unite them or fracture their bond irrevocably. "Now that you've chosen to unmask yourselves," he directed again, his voice steady, "what's next? Are we ready to confront what's truly at stake?" The silence that followed was laden with implications, illuminating the path ahead. They stood on the brink of revelations, not just regarding their adversaries, but about the true cost of vulnerability and honesty in relationships. Jake could feel change thickening the air, and it pressed in like a storm awaiting the first crack of thunder. In that suspended moment, he was faced with a choice. Would he finally embrace the depth of his truths and allow Mia to see him wholly, or would fear drag him back into the shadows? The answer would shift everything, threatening to change the course of their journey forever. The moment stretched, heavy with potential outcomes, as Jake stood on the precipice of revelation. Every heartbeat echoed with the weight of his unspoken fears. He needed to demonstrate courage, not just against the figures confronting them, but within himself. Mia's unwavering gaze anchored him, allowing him a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. He took a deep breath, channeling the swirling tempest of thoughts swirling in his mind. How could he navigate the chaotic terrain of his past while still holding space for their confrontation? It wasn't enough to merely reveal. He had to aim to connect, to summon authenticity from the very shadows he feared. "Let's lay our cards on the table," Jake said, directing his gaze toward Mia, signaling her to join him in this vulnerable plunge. "We need to address what's between us. All of it." Mia nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful, yet resolute. In that moment, Jake realized they were not just partners in this confrontation. They were accomplices in uncovering truths about themselves. The realization illuminated a path forward. "Every secret I kept was to protect myself," he continued, his voice low yet firm. "But in doing so, I built walls between us." The tension in the air shifted as the two adversaries reacted, uncertainty flickering behind their hardened expressions. Jake seized the opportunity, urging his narrative, ready to dismantle the fortress of latent fears around him. "I can't expect you to trust me if I'm still hiding parts of myself." "What are you so afraid of?" Mia asked, her tone challenging while also gentle. "I'm afraid of you seeing the truth," he confessed, the words tumbling forth unbidden. "The Jake who falters, who loses his way. The Jake who spent years running from his past." The vulnerability rolled off him like an offering, an acknowledgement of the deeper fracture within. He wasn't just fighting for their collective future, but also for his own redemption. He lifted his chin, surveying their opponents. Three figures not just defined by their anger or bravado, but by their own fears that he could now decipher. "And you," he directed, challenging them now. "What hides behind your need for control?" The air grew thick with tension as the taller figure recoiled, unprepared for the spotlight now streaming down on him. "Control is power," the adversary shot back, but Jake saw the tremor in his hands, the flicker of uncertainty pooling in his eyes. "Without it, I'm nothing." "Is that true?" Jake countered, stepping forward, no longer shrinking from confrontation. "Or is it merely a mask you've worn so long that you can't see what lies beneath? The truth is not our enemy. Losing ourselves in fear is." Mia stepped closer to Jake, her presence offering unyielding support. Together, they embodied a distinct defiance against the shackles of fear. The shift was palpable, elating Jake as he ventured deeper into this exchange. As he did, pieces of an overlooked part of himself revealed themselves. His capability as a courageous partner in the battle against uncertainty and loss. "Maybe it's time for all of us to step out from behind our masks," he said. "This cycle doesn't have to define us. We can choose to rise from this. I choose to rise." As the words settled around them, silence reigned. Jake knew his journey of self-discovery didn't end here. Rather, it was just beginning. Laying the foundation for trust and vulnerability meant risking further anguish, but within that was the promise of growth. He didn't know where this would end, but the act itself was liberating. Yet, even as the atmosphere became charged with potential change, a deep-rooted anxiety circled back within him. What would happen once the truth surfaced? What alliances might fracture, and how might the revelations echo into the future? The looming question remained. Could he and Mia brave the storm they had chosen to weather together? "Now," Jake said slowly, returning his focus to the opposition. "Who's ready to share their truth?" All eyes were fixed on him, the figures before him visibly shaken, hesitating at the brink of confrontation. With a purposeful certainty nestled amid tension, Jake steeled himself for whatever might come next, sensing volatile revelations in the air. Jake felt the weight of anticipation squarely on his shoulders as silence engulfed the space. It was a quiet, pregnant with possibility, yet fraught with tension. He surveyed their adversaries, uncertain faces now revealing their vulnerability, a reflection of his own internal struggle. The moment felt critical, not merely for the confrontation, but for himself. He knew that to unshackle his past, he must also unmask their truths. "Control is power," the taller figure repeated, though his tone wavered. The bravado had begun to crack, revealing the fragile inner workings of a man struggling against his own demons. Observing this, Jake's mind raced. Was this facade of control merely another form of fear? It hinged on the precipice of pain, much like his own. "Power has its limits," Jake replied, conscious of his voice carrying an authority born of intense introspection. "What happens when that power is stripped away? What remains?" With each word, Jake felt the surge of confidence within him grow. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. He pondered how long he had let his own insecurities suppress his voice, how often he had stepped back instead of confronting the challenges before him. This moment was a beacon, a clear reflection of the man he aspired to become. "Maybe we should start by confessing what drives us," Mia interjected, her voice steady as she took a step forward. There was a raw honesty in her demeanor that resonated with Jake, and he admired her fortitude. "What burdens do we carry that compel us to act this way?" Jake's gaze flicked to her, their connection reigniting a flame of courage within him. They were in this together, not just as allies against their external adversaries, but as partners committed to their internal battles. He caught the glance of one of the figures, a quiet desperation lurking just beneath the surface. It was the kind of emotion he recognized too well. "I once thought strength was found in silence, in keeping others at arm's length," Jake began, feeling the weight of those words resonate in the circle. "But I learned that true strength is in sharing our burdens, in allowing others to see our scars." The tension thickened around them, and it became an unspoken acknowledgement that they had all been sailing uncharted waters, each of them navigating grief and loss in different forms. With each confession, the air seemed to vibrate with relief. Every unburdened secret shared was a fragile thread weaving them closer. The taller figure stepped back, visibly shaken, as if grappling with the impact of this unexpected dialogue. "What if we can never change?" he lashed out, attempting to regain some semblance of stability. "What if we're forever trapped in our own cycles?" "There is always a choice," Jake asserted firmly. "Change may seem daunting, but remaining stagnant in our pain is a far greater prison. Each of us has the power to reshape our destinies, individually and collectively." A palpable hush fell over the group. A shift was taking place, both within their adversaries and inside Jake himself. Each moment felt like a revelation, his own voice sharpening purpose. He recalled the countless times he'd run from confrontation, from relationship breakdowns, and how each time had left him buried in unresolved shame. Yet here he stood, fortified by vulnerability and truth. He had unearthed a part of himself he had long hidden, a leader emerging from the depths of self-doubt, reclaiming his life amid the storm of conflict. As Jake's focus sharpened on the eyes of the adversaries before him, he sensed a stirring within them. Maybe their collective journeys toward healing could intertwine in an unexpectedly profound way. "Perhaps this is the first step in all of our transformations," he offered, asking ourselves who we truly are when the masks come off. The recognition in the air was incontrovertible. Just as Jake had begun to step into his power, facing down an even greater adversary, he felt the compelling urge to encourage their adversaries to do the same. He realized that unveiling their truths might not only save them from their current predicament, but could lead them all into uncharted territories of personal growth. And then, from the back of the group, a hesitant voice broke the silence. I'll start." Jake turned toward it, heart pounding, knowing this was the beginning of something significant for them all. They were on the brink of change, ready to confront the depths of their fears together. Yet as another voice stirred, an unsettling thought gnawed at Jake's gut. Were they truly prepared for the consequences that deeper truths would reveal? What truths would emerge from this? Would their revelations bond them forever, or would they fracture under the weight of their admissions? Jake inhaled sharply as he focused on the figure who had spoken up, the tremor in their voice echoing in the stillness. Here was a glimpse of what had been hidden, and he sensed it could change everything. Yet beneath his rising hope, unease creeped in. Was this truly the moment of transformation, or merely the start of further unraveling? Please, share. Jake encouraged gently, his voice carrying an undertone of reassurance. He sensed the weight of a shared fear permeating the air, a hesitation that palpably gripped his chest. The figure, a stocky man with shaggy hair, shifted uncomfortably. "I lost my brother," he began, his voice wavering as he looked downward, avoiding eye contact. "We had each other's backs, until I got careless. I thought I was invincible, thought I had control over everything." Jake's heart thudded heavily as the man continued, each word pulling him deeper into a well of empathy. "He paid the price for my arrogance. Now I just run away from everything." A thick silence followed that admission, and Jake could almost feel the man's soul aching, raw and bleeding. Realization dawning, Jake leaned into that moment. "That fear of loss can terrify us into silence," he interjected. "But just as it can paralyze us, it can also drive us to make change." Mia stepped closer, anchoring the space with her presence. "We all have losses, but it's what we choose to do with them that defines us." A few of the other adversaries shifted uncomfortably, but something had changed in the atmosphere. Jake recognized the submerged desperation mirrored within their own stories. Perhaps this was a pivotal moment not just for the tall figure, but for all of them. "It's not about blaming ourselves endlessly," Jake continued, gentling the tension. "It's about releasing our burdens, about sharing the weight. Let that pain be a catalyst for growth, instead of a chain that binds us." The tall figure lifted his gaze finally, something flickering in the depths of his eyes, a desperate yearning to be seen. What if we mask our true selves too well? What if the truths that come out betray us, rather than set us free? Jake's own memories surged within him, unveiling layers of deep-seated fears. We can't control how others will react, but we can sift through our own truths. If we start owning them, embracing them openly, we begin to reignite parts of ourselves that have long been stifled. The acknowledgement ignited a ripple effect, as others began to nod, exchanging glances filled with uncertainty, yet stirred by something immeasurable. "It's about confronting those fears," Jake urged softly, now unmasking his own wounds. "Not only to ourselves, but with each other." At that moment, Jake's thoughts revisited his own past. The reckless choices, the painful relationships, each marked with an avoidance of authentic connection. He had hidden behind a facade of strength for far too long. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," Jake confessed, the words escaping with a clarity that felt unfamiliar, yet liberating. It was empowering to frame his struggles as stepping stones rather than harbingers of regret. "I want to live fully. What I carry does not define me." Emboldened, the stocky man spoke again, his voice tinged with newfound bravery. "I want to try. I want to share my pain." As Jake locked eyes with him, a fierce pulse of determination surged through him. They were stepping into the unknown, with vulnerability as their compass. Yet this shared dialogue would come with an undeniable cost. Each revelation paved the way for deeper cuts in their souls, potential fractures running through what balance had remained. The dialogue unfolded like petals of a flower, revealing raw and undiluted truths. Each confession acted as both a balm and a weapon, capable of both healing and wounding. As Jake navigated this tangible connection, a distinct anticipation brewed in his chest. They were inviting shadows into the light, and one question loomed larger than the rest. What would happen when they uncovered secrets darker than any of them could anticipate? Would they emerge with unity intact, or descend deeper into chaos? With that thought weaving intricately into the fabric of the unfolding narrative, Jake braced himself for the truths that lay ahead. Days turned into weeks, and what began as an uncertain confrontation became a transformative journey for Jake and Mia. They navigated the intricate web of their pasts, peeling back layers of hurt and self-doubt, while fostering an environment of mutual understanding. The fear that had once gripped them loosened its hold, replaced with resilience forged through shared stories and collective vulnerability. Jake had faced his demons head-on, confronting not only the shadows of his past, but also the unsettling truths that he had long evaded. No longer was he merely a janitor. He had become a voice of empowerment for not only Mia, but also for the figures that had once threatened him. A newfound sense of purpose surged through him. Each revelation served as a catalyst for profound personal growth. He was finally the architect of his own narrative. As the air crackled with the promise of possibility, Jake witnessed a palpable shift in their adversaries too. They began to unravel, sharing their own burdens, casting off the heavy shackles of denial that had plagued them for far too long. It was a reciprocal awakening that underscored a powerful truth. Confronting fear unites us in ways we never anticipated. Yet even amidst this blossoming connection, Jake remained acutely aware of the hurdles strewn across their path. What would the repercussions of these confessions lead to? Would the ghosts of their respective pasts emerge to ensnare them as they traversed the jagged terrain toward healing? Then came the day of reckoning, a town meeting where the truth about Mia's past was to be shared on the larger community stage. This was not simply a confrontation with old fears. This represented a rite of passage, one that marked a new chapter in both Jake and Mia's lives. Jake felt the weight of anxiety clinging to the air, but more potent than his worry was a blossoming conviction. They would not be defined by their pasts. As the town hall filled with familiar faces, Jake stood beside Mia with steady confidence. This time, as he looked through the crowd, he did not see individuals who would judge or mock. He saw a community ripe for redemption, each face imbued with stories of their own. When Mia stepped forward to address the assembly, Jake felt an overwhelming swell of pride burst within him. She recounted her experiences with a raw honesty that resonated deep within the hearts of the listeners. Her voice quavered but never faltered, echoing the courage that had blossomed within her during their time together. Each word felt like a brick laid to construct a bridge to a brighter future. As her story unfolded, Jake felt liberated, knowing that his own past was not something to be buried, but rather something to be worn like armor. He stood tall, embodying the courage he had fought so hard to achieve, accepting the scars of his own life as part of his truth. The moment he joined her, articulating his journey, resonated with a collective intake of breath. They were not mere adversaries any longer, but fellow warriors in a broader battle for acceptance and freedom. In that profound moment, Jake not only achieved personal resolution, but also earned the community's respect. Whispers spread through the audience, and as he and Mia revealed the darkest corners of their pasts, they were met with nods of understanding rather than condemnation. The remainder of the meeting shifted into discussions about support, healing, and unity. The walls of judgment crumbled, revealing the possibility of connection that lingered just below the surface. Jake and Mia had not only fought for their own freedom, but had inadvertently illuminated the path for others, seeking to emerge from their own shadows. Jake stood in front of a captivated audience, his voice steady and clear. By being open and vulnerable, we can conquer the fears that cloud our lives. Today marks not just a reclamation of our narratives, but the beginning of a shared journey toward healing, together. And just like that, he had proven to himself and to the world that he was no longer just a janitor, but a beacon of hope and strength, having conquered the chains binding him to his past. The journey he and Mia undertook had transformed them both, forging an unbreakable bond and releasing them into the expansive landscape of their potentiality. They had taken control of their own narratives, emerging from the darkness with a fierce commitment to authenticity and growth. As Jake surveyed the room, he felt an overwhelming rush of fulfillment radiate from within. It was an accomplishment, one born of courage, resilience, and a growing understanding of the power in vulnerability. He had stepped into the man he was always meant to be. This was their moment, where fear had transformed into strength, and dreams were no longer whispers lost in silence, but an anthem of intentional living, louder than ever before. Now, it's your turn to embrace change. You need to subscribe now to keep fueling your journey of personal growth with our next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover the power of transformation. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake and Mia's journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible story of overcoming darkness with light. Don't wait even one more second.